Welcome to CPAC Now, America Uncanceled. I'm Mercedes Schlapp.
And I'm Matt Schlapp, and it's great to have you back in the anchor chair.
I know. You were holding the desk. You were holding it down.
Yeah, and a lot's been happening since you've been gone. You know, we've had this whole question about these Fauci emails that have come to light. We have Buck Sexton on the show, and he's going to talk about it because nobody's been out there more than Buck Sexton trying to highlight the ridiculousness of saying you have to do one thing one day and then the opposite thing the next day. I keep saying Dr. Fauci's like a coin flip. It could be heads, it could be tails. It seems random. The other way to describe it is he's like a Simon Says doctor. One day, you know, Simon Says stand on one foot. The other day, Simon Says stand on both feet. Like, it seems very random. What the emails show is that when Rand Paul was questioning Dr. Fauci all the way along the line, I kept retweeting these interactions. Everything Dr. Paul talked about has turned out to be true.
Right. So I think there's a lot of calls for Dr. Fauci to resign. You're seeing a lot of these Republican congressional members wanting to learn more about what he talked about, what he meant with these emails, because there was so much. There's so many questions out there. The mere fact that U.S. tax dollars were given to China for research to the Wuhan lab, that alone is troubling.
So the Obama administration didn't want to pay for this research at the Wuhan lab because they feared what the consequences would be. Dr. Fauci was an advocate for doing this research, which could have resulted in this strain of Chinese corona and could have brought this terrible Frankenstein of a virus into the world. I mean, it's everything that we keep saying, which is when they tell you it's all Trump's fault and they tell you that Fauci is the kind of the patron saint of taking the right healthcare steps, it really was the opposite. Donald Trump was listening to Dr. Fauci, but Dr. Fauci had done so many irresponsible things, and the emails are showing that what he told us we must do, he didn't even believe in. So getting into these emails is awfully important, and that's why we got Buck Sexton coming on the show.
That's right. So let's listen to Buck. He's got some great insight, and I got to tell you, we've had him on the show earlier on, and it was something else. It was something else when he was talking about Fauci, and he made a lot of predictions.
Yeah.
And joining us now is radio host Buck Sexton. Buck, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. How are you two doing?
You know, we're hanging in there. I just came back from Florida. Matt was managing 3 of the kids. I was managing 2 of the kids. Let me tell you, Florida is a very happy place. I don't know why we're here in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Feel the same way in New York City. I was just in Florida last weekend myself, and it's going well down there. That's for sure.
Just make sure that the Republicans of New York go down to Florida. No, we don't need the Democrats down there, right?
I totally agree. We're hoping that they don't mess with the very good but closer than I wanted it to be election result in Florida the last time around. I want Florida red 10, but Amen. Matt, you gotta work on that.
Buck, this is one of the things we've been talking about. Governor Abbott in Texas, Governor DeSantis in Florida, a lot of smart political operatives in both those states. Establishment Republicans want us to believe that our message is too strident, and most of us are Republicans, as I think we all understand, that our message is too strident, and we need to soften it up a bit, because if we lose the states of Texas and Florida by being too strident, we'll lose the whole country. And when you actually talk to people that know what's going on in these states, a lot of this immigration not the illegal type, but the immigration from other states into Texas and Florida is actually turning them into redder states. And when I think of Buck Sexton in New York City, I think about that salsa ad. New York City? Why is Buck Sexton in New York City? But we've already been through that. Life throws us curveballs. But I think one day soon you'll probably follow Rush Limbaugh and go to a great state like Florida.
I would love to. The plan is Florida, maybe Tennessee, maybe Texas. Those are the big 3 for me right now.
Well, we're going to need to expand to have more of these red states. But Buck, you've got a huge announcement. You and Clay Travis, y'all are going to take that important time slot of the Rush Limbaugh show from 12 to 3 p.m. Congratulations. That's so exciting. Tell us a little bit about what the show will look like.
Well, thank you. Yeah, the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton show will debut June 21st. We'll be on hundreds of affiliates of iHeartMedia radio stations So we're the premier radio network's show that's going in 12 to 3. And it's going to be Clay bringing first of all, a deep sports background to the whole conversation, which often turns into a political. Unfortunately, I think sports is often so politicized these days. And Clay also has a legal background. He's a lawyer and a very astute political observer. So he'll be bringing that, and lives in a red state. And I'm the blue state ex-CIA analyst, political. I don't know. People describe themselves as political nerds, and then they're being self-aggrandizing. But I like politics, so I read about it and all that stuff. We'll be talking about those things, and hopefully making Rush's audience proud. That's the whole plan. That's the whole point.
Well, Schlapp and I have changed the name of the show. It's going to be the Buck Sexton and Clay Travis show. So tell Clay that. He's not aware, but I just think alphabetically it makes more sense. Okay.
I appreciate it. He's older, so we feel like we gotta defer to seniority. He's only a few years older, but he's a little older.
I'm out, Buck. He's
Age
older
report.
than I am. Give me a break, okay? We know who's going to be in charge here.
That's why everybody usually refers to it as Matt and Mercy, you see, because that's the way it works. So,
not the kids.
Buck, we
not
are
the
really
kids.
proud of you. You're going to do a great job. This is an awfully important time to be in that important time slot on the radio, because for many of us, I'll speak for myself, my solace, besides, my faith and my wonderful family, was turning off the television and hearing the wise words of people like Rush Limbaugh and Mark Levin and others. So you know this, but you have a big job in front of you, and you're going to do great.
That's the plan. Thanks very much. Yeah, Rush was an inspiration for me for many years. And also, I guest hosted for his show many times. And the first time it happened was in 2014, so 7 years ago now. And that was a big break. So here we are.
So, in other words, don't screw it up, Buck.
That's right.
Okay, so let's go first to your tweet, because your tweets on Fauci, they're gold. It's just
Thank
gold
you.
nuggets all the time. This one is one of my favorites, and I really want to get you. You've been on this case on Fauci. I mean, almost like an investigative reporter on the Fauci madness.
He is my white whale, Mercedes.
Yeah, it's true.
No kidding. Fauci was a bigger fraud as pandemic hero than Cuomo or Newsom. Give it time, everyone will see the truth, though some will never accept it, no matter what. Buck, you're reading these emails that are coming out. What's your first take on what you're seeing with these Fauci emails that have been published?
You expect people like Newsom and Cuomo to be politicians, and that means to make decisions that are largely based in their interest, the interest of their party, and to build narratives often atop a lot of BS, right? That's the expectation. But someone like Dr. Fauci holding himself up as really the voice of science reason during this pandemic, there's a pretense there. There's a falsehood that he's just acting based upon what is objectively true and not on any extraneous or perhaps even corrupting interests going into his pronouncements from on high. And what we're seeing in these emails is that there was a clear dishonesty in the early months of the pandemic about specifically the lab leak theory, but also that Fauci was very much aware of what was being said in different media outlets, and that Trump and Fox News and all these different warring factions in politics, that he was taking sides one way or another with a lot of what he was doing. Now, he wasn't explicit about that, but you can see, based upon the fact that people are emailing him and he's talking about, oh, I saw this on that show and what they said isn't true, and I know that I'm a target for this other side. Fauci was a politician, and that's the part of this that I think people need to understand, they need to realize.
Yeah, so Philip Holloway had a great tweet that comments on this Tony Fauci tweet to Sylvia Burwell, who was a senior member of the Obama administration in various capacities, including the director of OMB. She's now out of government. Trump is the president. She's asking Anthony Fauci what they should do on masks. And as it says on the screen, Sylvia, masks are really for infected people to prevent them from spreading infection to people who are not infected, rather than protecting uninfected people from acquiring the infection. Now, you've tweeted this, I've tweeted this, you've tweeted this, saying that has gotten people banned from Facebook and Twitter. There have been warning labels put on tweets that say the very thing who Joe Biden picked to be his top advisor on Chinese corona is basically saying what we've all been saying. And the reason I feel so passionately about this is you were at CPAC, where when Chinese corona first started to spread, we had one public case of corona at CPAC. I called all these people who had these jobs and said, what do I do? They all said the same thing. Whatever you do, don't encourage widespread mask wearing. It will encourage people to think that wearing a mask will prevent them from getting the disease, and then they won't do other things that are actually more important to prevent getting disease, like getting in shape and stopping smoking and making sure you're managing your diabetes, et cetera. So you were at that CPAC. How outrageous is it that everything we've been saying, he actually believed at the same time?
The authoritarian speech censors are never, ever the good guys. We all know that, right? I mean, if you look throughout history, good ideas, true ideas, they're not the ones that are held by the people that are saying, you better shut up about that or else. And that's what we saw here once again. And I'm sorry, but people have asked, because, I've had it, you two know this, I've had I wouldn't say a Fauci vendetta, but this guy has rubbed me the wrong way from the very beginning. He actually went to my high school, by the way, which is pretty funny. So he's a distinguished.
What's that famous high school? It's a good high school.
Yeah, Regis. It's the scholarship school. Yeah. It's the school for nerd kids in New York. So I went there, and Dr. Fauci went there, and so he's a distinguished alum. I think they've scrubbed me Soviet style from the roles, especially now that I'm going into the 12 to 3 radio slot. But anyway, I've known from the beginning that Fauci was a big problem, and it's because you don't go from wearing masks are kind of silly and it might just make people feel better to if you don't wear a mask and then later 2 masks, you don't take the virus seriously. You don't make that kind of a transition based upon no new real evidence other than just what the public sentiment is in a moment, unless you're a political hack. And that's what Fauci was. So that was all I really needed to know at the beginning, that he was unwilling to stand against the mob and against the throngs that were just desperate for, understandably, anything from the public health community to make things better for us. But this guy's a fraud. That's really what it comes down to, is that he's a bureaucrat who's been sitting in meetings for 30 years. He has a long track record of being on the wrong side of major public health issues, including things that he said and positions he was pushing back in the early days of the HIV pandemic. So people who know this guy's track record were not surprised by the fact that somehow he only managed to upset Republicans and Trump voters with his pronouncements this whole time, even though he was wrong several times over. Why would that happen? That's not a coincidence.
Well, now you're seeing certain congressmen, Republican congressmen, basically come out and say these emails are alarming. They need to bring him up to Congress for a hearing, to talk to him, to interrogate him on what he was, again, pushing. This idea that on the mask, for example, where he changed his mind on the mask, where he was discussing the gain of function research, where he was aware of the possible lab leaks that, that they ended up denying for quite some time. But what I found really disturbing, Buck, was that he sounded like he had a cozy relationship with the Chinese, basically saying we're going to get through this together. How is it possible to get through this pandemic with the Chinese Communist government?
Well, Fauci views himself as part of a global community of scientists, right? He takes a very collectivist approach to even something like his professional, his choice of profession and what he does for a living, such that he doesn't understand. When you're talking about Chinese scientists, it's not a free country. They don't actually get to speak the truth, and they don't get to provide information if it's not what the Chinese Communist Party wants out there, wants shared with any counterparts, American counterparts included. So there's almost a naivete, but I would say in some ways it might even be more insidious than that. And that's just that he really believes his own BS here. He thinks that there's this thing known as, a scientific consensus, and that you can count on scientists in China to speak difficult truths when there are enormous implications about politics. Is he dumb or is he just dishonest? That's the question that I find myself asking about Fauci all the time. I think it's a combination.
You know this, working as a comms professional in the White House, that it takes a fair amount of time for somebody in an important job to prepare for an interview.
Yeah.
It takes a certain amount of time to prepare for press conferences. That's why a lot of people were alarmed at all those daily press conferences that the president kept having, because it was keeping everybody focused on the press conference and not focusing on how do we solve all these complicated problems around it. Nobody has done more press in the history of the presidency than Anthony Fauci. I've never seen anybody who's worked for a president do more press on a regular basis. I would even posit that that's really all he did. I don't think actually, Buck, he could have sat in too many meetings even, because he was preparing, he was putting on makeup, he was sitting in chairs waiting for satellite feeds to get up. That's what the man did. So he's more of a spokesperson for the weather vane of policies. Do you think I'm right or wrong on that?
Oh, yeah. I think he's the first person that I've ever known who was a de facto contributor at MSNBC and CNN. I mean, they should have been paying him. I mean, he was spending more time in those green rooms, or I know it was the pandemic, so we didn't actually go into green rooms, but you know what I mean, the virtual green room, than he was actually focused in on policy and what was really happening in many cases. And I would just tell people, what is the thing that Fauci said at any stage of the pandemic that wasn't either wrong or so blatantly obvious that it didn't really need to be said by him a million times? You know, what is, and when you look at his projections about how we're going to have another surge, how we might hit a plateau and then a surge, you know, over and over again, it just turned into the Fauci who cried wolf about 100 times.
Yeah.
That didn't help. This didn't do anything for us. All you really need to know about this guy is he wouldn't stand up to the teachers unions because the data was clear. Children should have been in school for the entire 2020-2021 school year, but he's a Democrat and he's a bureaucrat and he didn't want to upset the teachers unions. So he wouldn't go on as many TV appearances one time and say, guys, if your grocery store clerks can be showing up to work, teachers can be showing up to work. Let's get kids back in the classroom. That would have been science. That would have been bravery. But he's a coward and a feckless bureaucrat. And I think you have a sense of what I think of the man.
Well, I'm going to ask you a very personal question. Like Fauci, will you have a Vogue photo shoot as well?
They haven't reached out to, what is it, Anna Wintour, right? I'm not even sure I know who runs it anymore. But Anna has my number.
Pretty good, Buck.
You know, give me a call.
That's good. You have a high social IQ. That's
He's
very
New
good.
York City. Like, he gets it.
That's right.
He gets it. But hey, do we understand what's going on with the Fauci book, that all these Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, why did they pull the pre-sale books? Do we know?
Because I talked about it earlier on my show this week. I don't really know why it got, if it got pulled, what. I do know that it's a really bad look. The pandemic's still going on by his own admission. Your book's already coming out. Got to rush it out there right away.
That's what Matt said.
Having labored under the process of attempting to write a book, let me tell you, it's arduous if you care about what you write. And so it'd be impossible to be, you can't be Dwight Eisenhower leading the D-Day invasion and penning a very, interesting autobiography coming out like the day after the invasion. Like that's absurd. And it just shows you this cult of personality we fall into. I will say one thing. I know, Buck, we got to let you go, but I do agree with him on a couple things he said. He's basically now been honest on MSNBC and CNN by saying, well, we told people to wear the masks really just to calm them down. So for everyone who's still mask shaming out there, stop it, because there's absolutely no science behind any of it. It was always just about making us feel better. I'm 53 years old. I really don't need that. Second thing is,
what are you trying to tell me?
He's
Schwab?
on TV the other day and he's saying, well, what these Neanderthals on the right don't really understand is that our evolution of science changes. And when we said these things, we didn't really have perfect information. Buck, that's all he needed to say at the time. Look, the best information we have is that it is the safest thing to do the following. But he never used those qualifiers. It was always a mandate, and you must, and you're putting people's health at risk when you don't do exactly as I say.
All true. And I agree. And I thank you all for having me on.
You're a good man, Buck. Good luck with your show. And we hope to have you on many more times.
Absolutely.
And we thank you for this voice you've been on this question of all the things that tell us we're not allowed to talk about. Here's the deal. You better keep talking about it because we want to hear what you have to say.
That's the plan. Check out the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton show June 21st. on radio wherever you are, pretty much across the country, folks. So it'll be good. 12 to 3.
Count on it. We'll
Great.
give you all more
Absolutely.
information about how you tune in these stations all across the country. We're going to be right back. CPAC Now, America Uncanceled, after this short break.
And now we have some good news, Matt.
Awesome.
Okay, this letter came in from this wonderful young lady, Alyssa Sobel. She is graduating from the University of Tennessee, 21 years old, and we got to meet her at CPAC, and she just wrote just the most beautiful letter where she talks about that with every part of her life, as it felt as it was falling apart, whether it be because of COVID, that CPAC was still there. And she said that CPAC has meant so much to her and has truly shaped the person that she is today. And I think one of the nicest lines that she wrote was, where conservatives are always told that they are such awful people, I just want to make sure you heard at least one story of positive impact.
That's awesome.
And she, of course, said, Matt, don't stop tweeting.
Ah, that's great. Now, of course, I can't see anything, so I really can't see it. So you reading it is awesome. And I'm going to read that letter because we really appreciate that. And I want you to, let me just tell you one other quick story. Even more good news. Those are just my glasses, don't worry. Even more good news, which happened during Florida, which was I had one of our attendees come up to me, a woman who said that she had gone to CPAC every year with her husband, and then her husband got cancer. And for years he battled this cancer and battled it successfully. And the one thing they thought was they really wanted to go to CPAC 2021, the CPAC this year, which they thought was going to be in National Harbor. And then it was canceled because of Governor Hogan. And he said, and they said, and then you said that we're going to have CPAC in Orlando. And it was the greatest news that my husband and I ever could have had. So we realized that at this point in our nation's history, that half of us really are demonized. You know, when Hillary Clinton said we were deplorable, she really meant it. When her staff says we were irredeemable, they really meant it. And so I just love hanging out with you because, a more opposite characterization couldn't be true.
No, and I got to tell you, that's why we're putting on CPAC Texas. Remember, you can get your merchandise. You can actually get your shirt, your hat, your cups, because we feel it's important to keep talking about this message. It is a national conference. We have the A-team coming.
That's right.
We're just announced Ben Carson's coming, as well as we've got Rick Grinnell. We've got such a strong lineup, and of course, more surprises coming your way on who we're going to be announcing.
Big names. And I always love to say that we have two great board members who you all listen to constantly, KT McFarland and Gordon Chang. They're both coming. We announced that Robert O'Brien, President Trump's national security advisor at the end of his administration, is coming. So it's going to be a who's who, whether the issues you care about are China, in Iran and national security questions, or whether it's about these terrible economic policies coming out of the Biden administration. We're going to have the experts, the people you want to hear from. And, like we just talked with Governor Abbott, it's just, we want to all get together as well.
It's getting together, it's networking, and it's an opportunity to talk about what we need to do to make sure that we are prepared for the upcoming year. Fall is going to be critical. The Biden administration and these socialists are going to be pushing through an aggressive liberal agenda. We got to stop them. That's our job. And, we're excited to go to Texas. But Alyssa Sobel, thank you for writing this really special letter.
Cool.
This is why we do the work that we do every day, is because you're the next generation of conservative leaders that we need to be outspoken and to stand up against the radical left. But remember to follow us on your social media channels at CPAC, at MSchlapp, at Mercedes Schlapp, as we have more announcements coming out these next couple of weeks. Please remember to go get your tickets. Bring a friend, bring a girlfriend, boyfriend, bring out your kids. It's a great family experience. Go to conservative.org to get your tickets. They will sell out quickly. We want your feedback on the show. So let us know what you all are thinking and what other guests you want to see. And again, thanks for watching CPAC Now, America Uncanceled, and good night.